I work as a debt collector, and what I collect is very strange. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep doing this. Sure, the pay is excellent, but I'm not sure any amount of money is worth the mounting dread gnawing at my conscience. The jobs have grown stranger, more unsettling, and I can't help but question what I've gotten myself into. Please, if Mr. Salazar ever asks, pretend you never saw this. I don't want more trouble than I already have. Anyway, let me tell you about the encounter that really cemented my growing reservations. It happened just the other day. I'd parked my car a bit down the street from the target's house. I never park too close, better not to draw attention. The target would likely be home at this hour, and I wanted to be prepared. Glancing down at the collection notice, I almost did a double take. Then again, I shouldn't be surprised anymore. They're always strange. This one read, "One teardrop from a shattered dream." If I hadn't been at this for weeks, I'd have thought it some kind of joke. But I knew better. I knew what Mr. Salazar wanted, even if I didn't fully understand why. The man I was to collect from, Scott Bergman, had made some kind of deal with Salazar. Everyone on these lists has. The specifics never matter. The pattern is always the same: a desperate soul who tried to cheat fate and now owes something intangible and painful. I sighed, stepped out of my car, and took my toolkit with me. The porch light was on, and through the window's glow, I saw flickers of movement and the hum of a TV. He was watching something, maybe a football game, judging by the colors and the distant roar of a crowd. Perfect. Maybe I could catch him unaware. The less fuss, the better. I checked the street, empty, and slid the skeleton key into the lock. The door hinges groaned, and I grimaced at the noise. I paused, listening. There was a rustle, then silence. He might have shifted in his chair, but he hadn't come to investigate. Good. I made my way towards the living room, careful with every step. There he was, Scott Bergman, bathed in the glow of the TV. Another name on another bizarre invoice from Salazar. I took a steadying breath and pulled out my Beretta. Overkill, maybe, but I've been shot at enough times not to take any chances. Let's just say I've learned the hard way that desperate debtors can be dangerous. I stepped in, the TV's volume masking my approach, until a lull in the cheers let me speak up. "Hello, Mr. Bergman," I said evenly, "who's winning?" He nearly jumped out of his skin, spinning around to face me. His eyes flicked to my gun, and he froze. I took a step forward and said calmly, "Please, sit down. I'm not here to kill you. I just need to talk about what's owed." Slowly, reluctantly, he settled back down, fear and confusion dancing in his eyes. Eventually, he spoke, voice trembling. "I know what Salazar said, but I just needed more time. I can't go yet, I needed to see her one more time." I didn't press. Knowing too much about these deals might break my resolve. Still, I wondered who "her" was and why he was willing to risk Salazar's wrath. I changed the subject, asking about his work. He muttered something about construction. The shelves behind him told another story: old football trophies, high school glory days, dreams never realized. I saw it in the set of his jaw and the droop of his shoulders. He'd made choices that led him here, and now I had to collect the consequence. He grew silent, uncooperative. Time to use the tuner. A hateful device Salazar gave me, an oblong crystal that reveals what I need to know. Using it leaves me with splitting migraines, but it gets the job done. I rolled it in my hand, then tossed it gently to him. Out of instinct, he caught it easily. A quarterback's reflex, I thought, as the crystal's refracted lights danced over his face, luring him into a trance. I took the tuner back and peered inside. Immediately, my vision filled with images: a younger Scott Bergman, uniform on, training hard. The roar of a crowd. Ambition blazing in his eyes. Then a sweet-faced girl named Claire. High school romance, secret kisses under the bleachers, promises to reunite after he went pro. But life intervened, an injury, missed opportunities, spiraling depression. He never made it. Never came back for her. That's where the dream cracked. That's the tear I needed. I snapped my fingers, breaking the trance. Scott jolted awake, blinking confusion and panic, tears already forming at the corners of his eyes. He knew I'd seen his secret pain. He begged me, voice raw, "Please, I have nothing left. Tell Salazar I'll find another way. Anything." I stepped forward, hating myself for what I was about to do, but too far gone to back out now. "Scott," I said quietly, "you know why I'm here. You destroyed not just your own dream, but hers too. Every day you ask yourself, what if? You want to see her one last time. But this debt must be paid." Tears overflowed as he realized I understood all too well. Before he could resist, I held a small vial under his eye. One droplet, a tear from a shattered dream. That's what Salazar wanted. The vial caught it perfectly. Scott broke down completely, sobbing, pleading to a memory of Claire that couldn't answer him. I left without another word, the door clicking softly behind me. Outside, my skull throbbed from the tuner's aftereffects. I focused on my headache, trying not to think about the damage I'd inflicted on that poor man's spirit. I tried not to wonder what Salazar would do with that tear. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and drove into the night, the vial tucked safely away. Someone would be happy with my work tonight. But it wouldn't be me. I work as a debt collector and the things I collect are very strange. Part 2. I pulled up to Mr. Salazar's storefront, a modest facade masking something far darker inside. It never ceased to amaze me how he operated so openly, no sign, no posted hours, yet clients flocked to him. Whatever he offered, it must have been potent. The door's bell jangled softly as I entered. Lucia, the only other employee I knew, barely glanced up from her computer. Her fingers tapped away efficiently, as though she were logging souls rather than invoices. Without lifting her head, she said, "He's in the back." Of course he was. Mr. Salazar was always in. I turned to leave, but Lucia's voice stopped me. "You get shot at today?" she asked, a sly grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. I wasn't sure if she was joking or genuinely curious. "No, not this time. Just ended up with a splitting headache. Better than bullet holes, I guess." She finally looked up, smirking. "That's good. The last collector wasn't as handsome. Be a shame if you got messed up like he did." I couldn't tell if she was teasing or flirting. Maybe both. Lucia was a puzzle, distant one moment, oddly concerned the next. Her job seemed to bore her senseless, yet she was as efficient as a machine. And I knew from a previous incident that she could handle herself. I nodded in thanks, offering a wry smile. "Thanks for the concern, Lucia. Didn't know you cared." "Of course I care," she said with a shrug, her tone half playful, half sincere. "Besides, I don't want the hassle of finding another poor schmuck willing to do this job." She chuckled, and I let out a quiet laugh before heading into the back. There was a strange warmth in our banter today. Something I might explore later, if I survive this gig. Mr. Salazar's office felt like stepping into a crypt. Dim lights fell over shelves of odd trinkets sealed in glass cases, the air heavy and humid. It smelled faintly of incense and rot. He was perched behind an old oak desk, fiddling with colored vials that reflected eerie patterns on the walls. He turned as I approached, his face twisting into a smile that never reached his eyes. I suppressed a shiver. Something about him was always off, as though he were just wearing a man's shape for convenience. "Henry," he said, voice soft and sibilant, "I trust you obtained the item?" I held out the vial containing Scott Bergman's tear, one teardrop from a shattered dream. Handing it over, I felt a chill, as if I'd just bartered away a piece of my own soul. He studied the vial with unnatural delight. Seeing him so pleased made my stomach twist. I'd rather him remain dour and distant than show this creepy enthusiasm. "Excellent work," he said, placing the vial among his growing collection. "Lucia has your payment ready. Oh, and I believe she mentioned I have another job for you, one I'd like you to handle immediately." I tried to hide my grimace. I was bone-tired and my head pounded from using the tuner device earlier. Still, Mr. Salazar's stare told me I had no choice. I ventured a small attempt. "I was hoping to take a short break, maybe see my daughter." Mr. Salazar's eyes narrowed. His glasses caught the light, obscuring his gaze but amplifying his menace. "Henry, I'm sure your daughter enjoys the benefits of your employment. Shelter, food, comforts. Isn't that worth a slight delay in personal time?" His words were polite enough, but the threat beneath them was clear as day. He owned me, for now, and we both knew it. My shoulders sagged. "Understood. I'll do the next job." His grin returned, more forced this time. "Splendid. Oh, and Henry, a word of advice, for this next collection, you might consider leaving your car behind. You'll see why." He clapped my back with long, unsettling fingers as I left. I gritted my teeth at his touch, forcing myself not to recoil. Back in the main room, Lucia waited with my payment envelope in one hand and a new collection writ in the other. She arched an eyebrow, smirking as she held the envelope just out of reach. "I suppose you'll want this," she teased. "But surely you'd invite the brains of this operation to dinner before running off with your ill-gotten gains." I raised a brow, playing along. "I'd never dream of forgetting the vital role you play, fair lady. Dinner tomorrow at 8 sound good, assuming I survive until then?" Her eyes sparkled with genuine warmth, a welcome contrast to the gloom behind the curtain. "It's a date. Just stay alive, okay? I'll do my best." With a gentle tug, she handed me the envelope and the writ. I left, feeling oddly buoyed by our exchange. For a moment, I pushed aside the guilt gnawing at me over Bergman's tear and focused on the idea that maybe, just maybe, normal human connection was still possible, even in this twisted line of work. Once outside, I flipped open the writ. The name, Derek Willis. The item, a man's pride and joy. Vague as always. My stomach clenched at the possibilities. Pride and joy could mean so many things, maybe a cherished family heirloom, or worse, something much more personal. I followed the address to a tiny mobile home with a shabby little garage out back. The night was quiet, the sky starless. I heard faint, distant laughter, children inside, I guessed. If the pride and joy was his kid, I might not be able to do this. My mind flashed to my own daughter, Sarah. No. I wouldn't hurt a child for Mr. Salazar or anyone else. If that's what he wanted, I'd find a way around it. I decided to investigate the garage first, hoping the item would be something less horrific. The padlock on the garage door was easy to pick. Inside, a single light revealed a gleaming muscle car. Polished chrome, a fresh wax job, it sparkled like a trophy. This must be it, I thought. Some men cherish their children, this man cherished horsepower and chrome. A reflection caught my eye, movement behind me. I dodged just in time, and a baseball bat whizzed past my head. I turned to face Derek Willis, his expression contorted by rage. To him, I was a thief. He brandished the bat, snarling threats. So much for talking. I tried to mention Salazar's name, but it only sparked more fury. He cursed the deal, calling Salazar a fraud. The car was no miracle, it was a curse, he raved. He lunged again, swinging that bat like his life depended on it. One blow and knocked my gun across the garage, chipping his beloved windshield in the process. That only pushed him deeper into a murderous rage. He advanced, forcing me into a corner. I spotted a toolbox on the floor and kicked it toward him, tripping him slightly. Out of options, I pulled the tuner crystal from my pocket. He swung again, and I managed to grab his wrist, pressing the tuner into his hand. His eyes glazed over, mesmerized by the crystal's hypnotic refract. Memories flooded me again. The man before me had once known happiness, family, a stable life, but he traded it all for fleeting thrills and fast cars. Pride and joy, not his kids, not his family, just this damned hunk of metal. His children lived in neglect, overshadowed by his obsession with the car. My anger surged. This bastard had children, real lives he could nourish and love, but he worshipped his vehicle instead. My hands shook with disgust as I pocketed the tuner. He blinked back to reality. Before he could speak, I punched him hard in the face. He spat a tooth and cursed. I kicked him in the ribs, and he whimpered, crumpled on the floor. I took his car keys. He begged, no, not her, the car, of course, never his daughter. The daughter he'd threatened was worth less to him than this machine. I knelt beside him, voice low. I'm taking your pride and joy. Maybe now you'll remember what's truly important. If you don't treat your kids better, if I find out you've hurt them again, I'll come back. And I'll bring something worse than a tuner, I promise you that. He didn't respond, just coughed and glared with fear and hate. I left him tied to the garage door, limp as a rag doll, and guided the car out. Part of me wanted to smash it first, but I had a job to do. I drove the car away, its engine roaring in the quiet night. On the short ride back to Salazar's, my head pounded with regret and anger. Another job done, another piece of a human soul taken, or in this case, another symbol of twisted priorities. I tried to think of Lucia's smile and the promise of dinner tomorrow. Maybe that sliver of normalcy would keep me going. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way out of this job before it devoured what was left of my conscience. I work as a debt collector, and the things I collect are very strange. Part 3. I returned to Mr. Salazar's storefront late that night, still shaken from the events at ArcLight Industries. The instructions had guided me to stow the car, Derek Willis's so-called pride and joy, in a reserved garage space. A note in Salazar's unmistakable scrawl had told me exactly where to leave it. Oddly enough, both he and Lucia were gone. The place was empty, just the faint hum of a computer monitor in the front office and the dim overhead lights. I was too worn out to wonder. I just wanted to get home and crash. When I got back to my apartment, I saw a missed call from Nancy, my ex-wife. She left a voicemail chastising me for missing my weekly visit with our daughter, Sarah. I couldn't blame her. I had no decent excuse. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a half-hearted apology, something about being swamped at work, but I knew it sounded hollow. I felt guilty, but what could I say? How could I explain my real job to her? I tried to sleep, but my head throbbed and the tuner-induced headaches weren't letting up. They often lasted hours after using that device to peer into someone's memories. Worse, I dreaded the dreams that would come. Merging my mind with others' deepest regrets and secrets always played havoc with my psyche. It was like my subconscious had to process these fragments of other lives, churning them into strange, vivid nightmares. Eventually, exhaustion overcame worry, and I drifted into uneasy rest. The next day, surprisingly, I had no new assignments. That meant time to breathe. I tried calling Nancy again to see if I could make up my missed visit with Sarah, but she refused. I understood her anger, even if it hurt. I wanted to be a better father, but this job, this damn job, kept pulling me away. The only bright spot in my life at that moment was Lucia. We had our date that evening, and I was genuinely excited. When she arrived at a nice downtown restaurant, I was struck speechless by how beautiful she looked. Gone were the office clothes, replaced by something elegant and eye-catching. For a moment, I forgot about debts, tears, and stolen dreams. We got a table and settled in with drinks, careful not to talk too openly about our work. But we couldn't help trading stories, complaints about Salazar's cryptic instructions, the bizarre clients. Lucia compared Salazar's communication style to solving riddles of the ancient Sphinx, and I laughed openly. It felt good to share the absurdity with someone who understood. After a moment of levity, Lucia's tone grew somber. She sipped her wine and confessed she knew more about Salazar's business than she let on. She admitted she stayed in this job for her little sister's sake and that she worried about the kind of people Salazar dealt with. That they might come after us if things went wrong. Her words echoed my own fears. We both felt trapped by necessity, tethered to Salazar's twisted endeavors. "I know you have talents," she said softly. "You don't have to do this forever. I'm afraid something terrible will happen one day, and your daughter might lose you for good." Her eyes shone with genuine concern. I reached for her hand, grateful that someone cared enough to warn me. That small gesture of comfort, of human connection, meant more than I could say. I leaned in and kissed her, half afraid she might pull away. But she kissed me back, and for a while, we lost ourselves in each other's warmth. The night passed too quickly. Eventually, Lucia suggested we head back to my place. We spent the rest of the night together, and I hardly slept. This time, not because of fear or guilt, but because I wanted to savor every second of feeling like a normal human being with someone who mattered. In the morning, I woke to an empty bed and 2 messages on my phone. One from Lucia, apologizing for leaving early to get to the office, understandable, given our boss's unpredictable moods. The other from Mr. Salazar himself, a terse command to report in immediately. The tone in his text left no room for delay. I rushed to the office, heart sinking at the thought of another job already. Lucia was there, buried in paperwork. I greeted her casually, trying to gauge if we had to keep our relationship a secret. She just nodded, focused on the files. I guessed she didn't want Salazar to suspect anything. Disappointed but understanding, I headed straight for the back office. I was met by the sound of shattering glass and angry curses reverberating through the door before I even entered. Pushing inside, I found Salazar seething with rage. He'd flung some delicate ornament across the room, where it lay in pieces. Some oily liquid pooled at his feet, reflecting the dim lighting in sickly hues. He noticed me and his fury simmered down to a murderous glare. "Henry," he hissed, "about time you showed up. Sleeping in, were we? Your duties do not wait on your convenience." I didn't bother defending myself. I just nodded and waited. He composed himself slightly and pointed to a peculiar antique cabinet. Pricking his finger on a hidden latch, he retrieved a small metal box wrapped in black cloth. His blood still dripped from the prick, smearing the cloth. He shoved it into my hands, telling me to open it only before the next target, and only when I was ready to collect what was owed. He handed me a new writ. I didn't even look at it yet. His mood was too volatile to risk any questions. "Get out," he snapped, hurling another fragile object at the wall behind me. I left without protest. Outside, Lucia caught my arm and apologized for acting distant. She insisted Salazar must never know about us. Her reasoning made sense. He could use our relationship against us. I agreed, and she promised to come by later that night to cook dinner and decompress. Her caring touch and words steadied my nerves. I stepped outside, my breath turning to fog in the early light. Then I read the collection writ. The target, James Chalmers, a name I knew. CEO of a major defense contractor, Arclight Industries. This was beyond crazy. Salazar wanted me to collect borrowed time from a man who likely had an army of guards. I felt my blood run cold. There was a note added by Salazar himself, explaining I should use different transportation. I looked over to a nearby parking lot and, impossibly, the muscle car I'd collected from Willis was waiting there. Another layer of Salazar's intricate and insane plan. Donning a mask that transformed my face into Derek Willis's, I infiltrated ArcLight's building. Everything went wrong fast: security, old grudges, the front desk alarm. I ended up battling my way up to the executive floor, forced to use another cursed item Salazar gave me, a pitch-black mirror that spawned impossible illusions or ghosts. The guards vanished into the mirror's nightmarish confines, leaving me shaken and horrified by its power. Reaching Chalmers' office, I confronted him. Mistaking me for Derek, he railed against Salazar. He pointed a gun at my head, no intention of letting me walk out alive. I tricked him into opening the box Salazar had given me. It contained a small hourglass, the key to collecting his borrowed time. Chalmers mocked me until I uttered, "It's time." Then I watched as he rapidly aged, collapsing into a withered husk. Borrowed time indeed. Horrified, I took the hourglass and fled. Using another of Salazar's pre-arranged escape routes, a bizarre zipline and series of cables, orchestrated by unimaginable means, I escaped the building and vanished into the city's dark streets. Now, heading back to Salazar's office, clutching the hourglass, I wrestled with my conscience. I just witnessed magic and brutality beyond understanding. I'd stolen a man's vitality, destroyed armed men with a demonic mirror, and deceived everyone around me. All in a day's work, apparently. I thought of Lucia's worried eyes, of Sarah's disappointed face, of the line I kept crossing. This job was devouring me piece by piece. I needed to find a way out before there was nothing left of me to save. But for now, I had to deliver this impossible trophy to Mr. Salazar. At least I had one small comfort: tonight, Lucia would be there. Maybe together we could find a path forward, a future that didn't revolve around stolen dreams and cursed relics. I sighed, stepping inside, bracing myself for whatever came next.